is right here. See if I can get it too. And then this gives you the same context. So the Pruitt-Igoe site, the NGA West site, Murphy Park, Laura Hall Townhouses, Carr Square, Cambridge Heights, which is where Cochrane Gardens was, and then Preservation Square. And then to give you just the sense of distance, this is Washington Avenue. So when we say just north of downtown, when we say the near north side, it really is the near north side. This is Preservation Square pretty much as it was built in the late 70s. And then as it looked right up until we began construction on this project. And more telling is the site. So the site of Preservation Square, there were some things that we hadn't learned about new urbanism. Brittany, you're back on. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the interesting flaws in the original site plan?
Absolutely. Yeah, so the original site plan, as you can see, there's only one street, that North 16th right in the middle, that connects to the perimeter of the site. So it's connecting to Casanova Fallon, but that's it. And the streets going east and west are ending in cul-de-sacs. So the site was really disconnected from the surrounding community as a whole. Other things, and actually, Kate, if you want to flip to the next slide, I kind of want to touch on what strategies matter and how that site was later, re-looked at because of LEED ND. So Katie, you can flip to the next one. So the LEED ND program, which is LEED for neighborhood development, was created with USGBC. And although this isn't necessarily the specific topic for today, we felt like we needed to talk about it a little bit because the third component, the green building, is what really leads to enterprise green communities. So we felt like we needed to touch on it a little as we talk about the preservation site. So LEED ND, created with USGBC, means that we're looking for more sustainable, connected neighborhoods that reduce the environmental impact, but they also promote better health and economic opportunities for the residents. It is a rating system, and it looks at these three themes to comprise a basis for neighborhood design. You can flip slides, Katie. Thank you. So just high level highlighting smart growth and new urbanism as the components of LEED ND. LEED ND really looks at the site location and how it really focuses on redevelopment and using communities that are already there, that have public infrastructure in place, and revitalizing those rather than expanding the footprint of development. This helps to conserve land and leads to more livable, walkable, and transportation efficient neighborhoods. So this is not only important for the environment, but it also means that residents aren't commuting far distances to reach their resources or their jobs. It means that there's more opportunity for foot and bike traffic. It means that their health is improved because they're not spending so much time commuting, sitting in cars, living a more sedentary lifestyle, which we know leads to common diseases and illnesses. Less vehicles on the road obviously means less greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, which is healthy for everybody. And having multiple modes of transportation is key for our low income families because we want to set them up for success and give them options. So for example, if their car breaks down, they may not have the means to go rent a car. So if they're living in a site that is far disconnected from their job or the resources they need, they may not be able to get there and get to those things. So living in a community that's close to infrastructure where they can bus or bike or walk to the places that they need really sets those families up for better success. And then developing in existing communities means that we have a more connected site, and therefore they are able to get to those resources such as grocery stores, healthcare facilities, education places, and opportunities for employment. This also means that we're limiting the need for natural and financial resources for the infrastructure since it's already in part there. And then more resources are able to be put back into the residents' pockets themselves by having lower rents. And the owner developer is able to put more money back into the economy and develop more affordable housing. Okay, next slide. So this is the newer Preservation Square site plan. And as you can see, there's now a street that's another street that's connecting Cass to O'Fallon all the way through. And then if you remember those cul-de-sacs on the east and west ends of the site, those are no more. And now Hogan is connecting all the way to North 14th in 2 places. So this is a much more walkable, drivable, livable community. There's a lot more sidewalks. There's a lot of bicycle storage trickled throughout the site. Another piece that was really important here was the setbacks of the buildings. So we tried to make sure that all the buildings were pretty close to the sidewalks so that put more space behind the buildings for the parking lots and amenity spaces. And this allows for residents and community members as they walk these streets, which are now fully tree lined also, to be along buildings and vegetation and not just walking along large open spaces of pavement like they would be doing if the parking lots were pushed to the front. The other thing that's within the site now is more recreational spaces, such as like the green park-like space. There's a lot of tot lots, which have different levels of play activity for children. There's a lot of walking paths and other site amenities that encourage different levels of physical activity for the different levels of residents living here. And it also helps there be a lot more opportunity for social interaction between the community members and the community at large.
And the other final thing, which was created by the cul-de-sacs and the original site plan, is there's CEPTED methodology, so community policing through environmental design. So there's a natural delineation now between public and private spaces. So behind the buildings, these interior spaces are private. They're for the residents, know they're for the residents, and then the public spaces along the streets are public, and so it's known, it's a clear delineation of this is private space, this is public space. You should be here. You maybe shouldn't be here. And again, opening up those streets make it a lot easier for policing. One of the things that happened with the cul-de-sacs is there were a lot of crime that was occurring on foot and on bike, and the people on the bike on bikes and on foot could get to the cul-de-sac and go straight through, and the police in their patrol cars couldn't pursue them. And so there was it was sort of setting up opportunities for crime. So LEED ND really helped us create a structure for how we wanted to look at the whole neighborhood. And then Enterprise Green Communities, which we're going to go into now, helped us think about that green building component. So the smart growth and the new urbanism came out of LEED ND, and now for green buildings, we turn to Enterprise Green Communities. So Enterprise Green Communities was started around the same time that LEED was being developed. It was started by Enterprise Community Partners, who are an affordable housing developer, investor, foundation, and think tank. And they were working with USGBC and LEED to say, what is a good path for affordable housing? And at the time, USGBC was a little overwhelmed by all of their initiatives. They were just trying to get LEED off the ground. And they said to Enterprise, here's what we're thinking for LEED for new construction. What are the best components to take from that for affordable housing? And then you, Enterprise, run with it. So Enterprise developed a criteria that mirrored a lot of the credits and submittals that were in LEED, but really highlighted and emphasized those things that directly affect affordable housing communities. And one of the things they did for the first 15 years of the program is there were no certification fees. You had to have HERS rater, you had to be Energy Star certified, and so there are fees associated with that, but there was no certification to actually be Enterprise Green Community certified. And now they do have a certification fee, but it's very nominal, and it's just to help them cover their overhead for reviewers. They also really focused again on what is good for, what are the most important points for affordable families, what are the things that are going to directly impact low-income families living in affordable housing. To get Enterprise Green Community certified, it is Enterprise Green Communities is housing. So you can be mixed use, but there has to be a housing component. There's a new construction and a renovation path, which is great because in Preservation Square, we're actually renovating several of the old buildings. The units were not that old, and so we worked to renovate, at least in phase one, the old buildings. Some of the older buildings that were situated in such a way we could keep them in the new block design. And you have to have at least 20% of the community be affordable. So we have a development in Detroit that's actually 25% affordable, that's certified under Enterprise Green Communities. But you don't have to be 100% affordable to get it, but you do have to have an affordable component. So let's talk a little bit about EGC. So EGC is built around 5 themes: integrative design, path to zero energy, healthy living, water, and resilience. And each of these directly affects, is sort of thought about in how does this affect, again, a family living in affordable housing. So the goal of integrative design, which are often the goals of most green building criteria, but are really important, is controlling development costs. That it's much easier to make changes on paper than it is to make changes while you're doing a walkthrough of a complete building. So having an integrative design approach from the beginning helps to control development costs. Another goal of integrative design is to engage residents and ensure that, because these are housing projects, housing developments, because they are often have a direct population that they're serving, that you tend to know who your residents are going to be or who your neighborhood stakeholders are, to engage them from the beginning so that they're stakeholders in this effort. And as they become residents in the new community, they're excited about living in a green community and want to operate their homes to their best advantage. And then educating workforce and making sure that your subcontractors and your laborers on the site know what they're doing. That saves money, it saves a lot of energy, but it also creates a workforce that can build more green housing and has more opportunity to go into the community and get attached to projects like this.
So the path to zero energy, it's fairly straightforward in the sense that we know that energy costs in effect are utility costs, right? So having more energy efficient HVAC systems, hot water, appliances, and lighting reduces the utilities, which therefore allows the owners to have a reduced rent, and it again puts more operating costs back into the owner's pocket for more affordable housing. You're putting it back into the community. It's really important that the construction quality and the indoor comfort are considered, in that if we use cleaner energy sources, it not only benefits the environment again, but it also helps impact the residents' health. The higher efficiency building envelopes have a tighter seal, so the environment inside, the temperature and the comfort level can be maintained longer if there is a event where there's a loss of power. And the EGC program really pushes us towards all electric to get rid of the combustion gases, the byproducts of that are negative on families' health. But in cases where all electric may not be a current option, we're encouraged to do future proofing. So putting in the pieces that are necessary so that later we can move to an all electric system, or introducing photovoltaic panels so we can start to have PVC powered lighting and water heaters. And then this just makes these communities more resilient and adaptable as the environment changes, which we all know is, an ongoing concern. And then as resource availability changes, and as these systems become more cost competitive. So we want to make it a place where there can be changes made that make the least amount of impact on the residents. So it doesn't cause displacement or a large disruption to their life, but these places are able to adapt as the environment adapts.
And then the healthy living component is really important for low-income families. For a lot of the families in McCormack Barron communities, they've lived in poor housing with lots of asthmagens and allergens and VOC, other VOCs, other off gases, and following EGC, EGC really has an emphasis on reducing all of those things in the built environment. So switching to hard surface flooring, to durable materials in kitchens and bathrooms, there's a huge amount of points for making your property a non-smoking property. Really the things that can directly affect the quality of life. And because housing is the #1 social determinant of health, really improving the health outcomes for our populations. And then finally, thinking about activity and access. How do we encourage outdoor activities, recreation, using the stairs, all of those little interventions that don't cost a whole lot to add, but really affect the quality of life and quality of health of a community.
So water, again, water conservation is the direct link to the utility cost and keeping utility costs down. Water quality is important because a lot of our vulnerable communities are at the most risk to being exposed to lead. So the EGC makes sure that that's being looked at, and that any pipes that are left from older standards that allowed a certain amount of lead to be in those pipes are getting removed. So it's a direct link to the residents' health. And again, residents may or may not have as much, resources to be spending tons of money on healthcare. So what we want to make sure we're doing is getting rid of problems from the start and just not allowing them to come into these residents' lives. And with management, it's important that we look at stormwater management to decrease pollution and runoff, because ultimately those things can impact flooding. And again, we want to mitigate any type of catastrophic or health detrimental things that could further kind of cause a domino effect for the families living here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question before we go any further? This is Tish Hunt. I am actually the lead manager for Healthy Blue Missouri, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Brittany. I did have a question when we were talking about, you guys, I'm new to the group, the houses that are being the older homes and things. So has there been thought, like I said, I'm new to the group, I've looked into that and making sure the soil and everything in those homes with the lead as well, those older homes that are being torn down and the lead that might be in the soil that children might have access to with the newer homes going up? Because Missouri is the #1 producer of lead, and we have over 600 children on our lead tracker that have elevated lead levels.
Yeah, so we have part of EGC that sort of in this big overview, because we only have half an hour, but part of it too is there is an expectation that you do a phase 1 ESA and follow it with as needed a phase 2. And on this site in particular, we had a phase 1 and a phase 2 and followed the protocol for the phase 2 to make sure that we mitigated anything that's present on the site, awesome. Whether that's through capping hotspots or cleaning up, whatever the recommendation was.
Oh, thanks, Katie. Okay, just checking.
You're welcome. No, that's a great question. And it's super important. Again, this, the population that we're serving, these are things that, for generations, it's something that has been ignored or swept under the rug. And,
Right. And now
is
they
it-
just found that a lot of chain link fences also have lead. You know, they're painted with lead paint. So chain link fences and stuff around schools and all of these things. And I wouldn't have honestly ever thought about a chain link fence and kids being out on the school playground, or chain link fences around different, you know, neighborhoods or whatever that also can have lead in them.
yeah.
Actually, you guys, do we mind if we just go straight into questions and kind of open it up for conversation?
No, not at all. The last thing I
Yeah.
was going to say is just the importance of resilience to a low-income community, which is, you know, that often the people who are on the front lines of climate change are the ones who can least afford to have a disruption to their lives, to their living situation. They can't just move out and live in a hotel for a couple of weeks while the power's out. And so anything that you can do to plan for various incidents, prepare, and then help families weather and recover faster. If you can keep families in their home, if you're situated in such a way that they can open their windows when they can't turn on their HVAC, or if they have a way to access a way to keep their medications cold when there's a power outage. So that's just the fifth component of EGC. But let's talk, because I don't want to run out of time.
One of the things that I'm interested in is, are there specific points involved in order to be able to achieve certification? Or are these all qualifications that you have to have in order to be called an enterprise green community?
Sorry, Brandon, I don't know if we lost Katie. Can you repeat your question?
Sure. I wasn't sure if there were specific points, kind of like in LEED, where you would get a certain amount of points in order to be able to achieve different statuses, or is everything a qualification in order to be able to achieve just the certification in total?
Yeah, so there's two different paths that you can take. One is there's a lower point standard, like minimum, that you have to meet for a renovation project. I think it's 30 points. And then there's another path to get the actual certification for a new construction project. But there is a point system. You can certainly just build to the EGC standards and not get the certification if you don't necessarily need it for the project. But there is a point system in place, and there's a full checklist with all of these 5 themes kind of broken out into more subcategories and dispersed in how many points. So there's a lot of things that are mandatory in the program requirements, so that helps you meet the minimum standards of each of these themes. And then there's the optional points that you can then pick and choose how to meet, depending on the project specific requirements and the site and all of the other things that impact the project.
Yeah, so the mandatory points are those things that that the enterprise team determined have the most impact while being the lowest hanging fruit. And then the points tend to be attached to, you have to get the minimum of 35 points for new construction, but they tend to be the things that are attached to harder to get, harder to reach things. So you can pick and choose which ones you want to do to get you to those 35 points. I think in the first phase of O'Fallon, we were at 69 points. So at least for us and the way we're designing our projects, the 35 is pretty easy to get. And we tend to be between 69 and 80 points when we're done, just by picking the things that we think are the right ones to do. An example would be the non-smoking is worth a lot of points. We feel strongly that our community should be non-smoking. Solar ready is also worth a lot of points, and it doesn't add a lot of cost to the project, but we think it's really important, having retrofitted several developments in St. Louis with solar that were not built to solar ready specs. It's really nice to just know that we're putting in the right support in our trusses and the pipes in the wall to run future solar photovoltaic, even if we don't have the budget to put solar on now.
We did have a question from Linda come in, and she was asking about how water runoff basically is incorporated into the design of it.
So,
Oh, go ahead,
go
Katie.
on, Brittany. No, I think you actually know more about the specifics.
Well, I'll just hit two points that stand out or are obvious. We are underground piping most of the water off of the buildings. So we're taking anything that lands on the buildings and the roof, down gutters, and directly connecting it to the underground water. So that helps immensely. We also have some recessed like bioswales on the project site. So that's also helping to collect the water and let it process through natural plantings.
Would you mind sharing the name of the projects that you guys are working on again? Or if you do have like a website where we can like stay up to date of how the progress is going?
So the particular project we've talked about today is Preservation Square.
Preservation Square, okay.
And that's the one in the near north side. And I think there might be, I think there's maybe a Twitter account that's the most up-to-date information. And I did want to quickly talk about, this is an older version. I meant to take the logo off. That's why it's circled. The EGC process is just to give people a sense of when you would start in enterprise. So early in pre-development is when you start thinking about, do you want to do EGC? How are we going to do EGC? Establishing the goals and requirements. As we start to get into construction drawings is when you start, and schematics to establish the methods. How are we going to achieve those goals? How are we going to achieve those requirements? You have to submit a pre-build application to enterprise 60 days before closing and construction start. And then during construction, work on making sure that you're managing the submittals and inspections that you need for certification. And then post-build is 30 days, is submitted 30 days after construction is completed. Enterprise is pretty flexible on those 60 and 30 days. It always takes them 30 days to review and typically takes them 60 days to review. So they're pretty forgiving if you are a month early or a month late. And then, as I said, they're a little bit late. So certification can actually happen about, take up to 90 days after submittal. And that's not really a big deal, except a lot of affordable housing is financed by low-income housing tax credits. And it's a requirement of the state housing finance agencies who administer their credits that you be green certified and you demonstrate green certification at a certain point in the project. And often it's kind of a rush at the end to make sure that we have that certification in hand to give to the state housing finance agency when they want it. So that's sort of the biggest deadline to pay attention to for a lot of our projects. Are there any other questions?
Yes, I had one I put on the chat. What specifically in the design is being incorporated in order to provide wholesome activities and support for education needs for teenagers? Because, you know, somewhere between start of middle school and end of what should be high school graduation, I think in St. Louis we have a big problem, you know.
So Enterprise Green Communities doesn't look directly at that. After construction, they look at operations and maintenance. They look at resident green building training. They're very much focused on the green building side of things, not necessarily all of the other things that you need to build a neighborhood. And even in Lead for Neighborhood Development, there's they look at the proximity to those opportunities. They don't look at the quality. They don't look at the provision. They just say, are you near a rec center? Are you near an outdoor park? Are you near after school programming? But they don't say, is it good after school programming or children using it? The one nice thing about this particular project in Preservation Square is it's actually a choice neighborhood. It got a $30 million grant from HUD to help redevelop it. And a key part of the choice neighborhood is called the people component, which is the human capital building. That's a 4.5 of that $30 million grant, $4.5 million is provided to specifically address those human capital development components in the neighborhood. So while we were developing the master plan, we were also developing a person building plan and doing needs assessments on the residents in the neighborhood and their families, finding out what services they needed access to, finding out what programs they needed access to, what was working, what wasn't working. Can they even, down to, can they get to their job? How do they get to their job? Do we need to work with Metro to improve bus lines because people need to get to work? Where are the children going to school? Are they being bused all over the city, or are they going to Jefferson School, which is right next door? How is the programming at Jefferson School? For the older kids, do they have access to after school activities? What are they doing after school, and how do we improve those components? That whole part of this grant is being run by Urban Strategies, which is a nonprofit located in downtown St. Louis. And each family within the site has the opportunity to work with a personalized case manager on a family development plan and an individual development plan to outline their goals and then get connected to the right services and programs. Also in this neighborhood, the city and stakeholders are working very, very much want a community center with recreational activities and after school programming. And they're working very hard to identify the financing to put that together. That's outside of Enterprise Green Communities. So Enterprise Green Communities is totally agnostic about that. And they're agnostic about the provision of health services and job training.
Brandon, you want to close us out?
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you to Cady and Brittany for being here and presenting Enterprise Green Communities. I would love to encourage everyone to attend our evening program, which is coming up next week on Tuesday at 5. No, not next Tuesday, the following Tuesday, sorry. For our evening program. It's going to be super exciting. We are talking about an Enterprise Green community building doorways. So I do encourage everybody to join us for that program. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for your comment, George. Oh, probably already left, but that's cool. George was a resident to Preservation Place. Cool. Thank you guys so much. Take care. Thank you, Cady. I appreciate it.
I didn't see George's comment either. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, and he does have that. I mean, it's a really interesting, for the people who are still on, it's a really interesting rationale of like when we built O'Fallon in the late 70s, it was, we need to build this like a suburban community and have the cul-de-sacs to create a sense of neighborhood, and that we're going to build this sort of fortress. Mm-hmm. And we didn't realize, you try what you can try, and it was an experimentation. And this is a particularly interesting project for us at McCormack Barron, because most of the choice neighborhoods that we do and where we do this kind of transformation, it's a public housing site. Mm-hmm. And so it was built by the Public Housing Authority and managed by the authority in the city And this is the first time, hopefully the only time, although there might be another one where it's actually something that we built early on
Yeah, yeah.
in our,
Yeah,
this
super
was the
cool.
first housing development Washington Apartments on Kings Highway was our very first development, and this was the second.
Awesome. Yeah, I would love to see more images and photos. Those designs are great. The kind
Yeah,
of
I was gonna say,
before and
look at the, hopefully the Twitter feed there's a video.
Okay.
So I'll see if I can find, and it might be on the McCormack Baron Twitter feed. I'll email it to you, but there's a really cool drive-through of the new buildings.
Oh, fun. Cool. Well, thanks,
Thank you.
Katie. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Pamela.
Bye.
Take care, you guys. Enjoy the weekend.